and provide conditions where the body will heal itself. I don't want to get too deep into the technical issues, but I have one very practical example from my own personal experience. Not that I've been a drug addict, but I've worked very closely with Professor Carl Schmidt, who in 1980 had proven that you can remove addiction, a craving for whatever drug you're taking by passing a low voltage current from the acupuncture points between just behind the ear. And this is called NET, N-E-T. And look up NET on the website, and you'll see the equipment and the progress and the research that's now being undertaken in Scotland and in York University and Bristol University. And healing addiction without drugs has been a reality since 1980. It was done in a National Health Service hospital at Yeovil by Professor Carl Schmidt, and his longtime assistant came up to me at a political meeting and said, I worked for Professor Carl Schmidt. I analyzed all his records and looked at all his patients and their progress. These patients have all become our friends, and he had a 90% success rate.
Right.
It's absolutely, this is critical because there are 236 methadone deaths each year in England alone. The cost of methadone each year is at least 111 million. And so people are being prescribed methadone and dying from it in those numbers. The cost of drug and alcohol addiction to society in England is of the order of £39 billion. And this could have been checked and stopped a long while ago. It is another extraordinary national scandal because of political bias against the idea of using what in fact was an acupuncture method used in Hong Kong, which a marvelous lady called Meg Patterson discovered from Dr. Weng. And Dr. Weng had an opium addict who he was treating acupuncture, and he decided one day, well, let's just put a low voltage current between the acupuncture needles either side behind the ear. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, this gentleman came back and said, I don't know what you did to me, but I've lost my craving for opium.
Because we know that...
And this was another extraordinary discovery, which has taken 30 or 40 years to get into the mainstream. It's just getting into the mainstream now. But it opens up this whole world of neurotherapy and understanding that so many people in prison, so many people who don't fit in or have difficulties or frustrations or anger, they simply have got problems with balancing the brain waves, the waves in the brain, the balance between the 3 key parts of the brain. And it's being able to resolve that problem, understand that problem, have neurofeedback so that we can look and see what specific problems different people have and understanding the best treatments for them, is that we can provide the best form of preventative medicine and bring out the best in people. And this is so important within a society which is growing more aggressive, more totalitarian, more confrontational, and telling us all exactly what we've got to do. We have to break that particular mold as soon as we can. Otherwise, we will have politicians building labor camps because they will be too broke to pay anybody their wages. This happened in Russia. It happened with Hitler's Germany. And it's going the same way now with another great, not a capitalist failure, a socialist failure, to understand that the money supply has to be effectively controlled for any society to run efficiently and smoothly.
Because when you mentioned with the drugs as well, we know that basically what drugs do to your brain is that they rewire your neural pathways, in order to stimulate basic communication between pathways in your brain that actually releases endorphins and basically makes you feel good, right? So you become addicted to the flow of the electricity that exists within the brain anyway, in a sense, which might sound kind of weird, but the chemicals just release certain chemicals inside us, which gives us energetic flows in the brain. So what you're describing there is it possible that could be, how should we put it, that it might be rewiring in some way the natural neural pathways of the brain if that is stimulated by energy, or do you know more specifically how exactly it works?
Well, the simplest way I describe it, and I may not be totally right, is that we have receptors, and those receptors need to be lined up properly.
Yes.
If we overload or take any substance in excess, then we fuzz up those receptors and connections. And we can soon realign them by passing the correct low voltage current through the head. But we give ourselves all sorts of problems. And the main problem is that, in the 1970s, it was discovered that the human body manufactures its own indigenous opioids, which are endomorphins, as you say.
Yes.
And these function as neurotransmitters and give us the feel-good factor. So we need this feel-good factor, and we need to manufacture ourselves within us these endomorphins. And these are also stimulated by physical activity. So physical exercise is another key element. So if you're a couch potato, you're heading in the wrong direction anyway, especially if they don't smoke hash.
Right.
Unfortunately, these substances of addiction, which include nicotine and alcohol,
yes,
suppress the production and release of these opioids or endomorphins. So you end up by suppressing your own body's natural mechanisms. Now, consequently, if we try and reduce one drug dependency by using another or the same drug, for example, if we replace methadone with heroin, which prevents the production and release of our own opioids, our addiction most likely remains, and it takes a long time to overcome. So you can't use another substitute. And, of course, my own experience is that every kind of prescription drug given to young people who have drug problems, they all have their side effects and difficulties, and some of them are worse than the original problem.
And that's what they've been experimenting with primarily with these SSRIs. What's it called? It's rein uptake inhibitor. What is the initials there? SS. Anyway, it's another set of these drugs that has been targeted towards the receptors in your brain to release, endorphins in a particular way and all this. And what I've been able to see from that is that it's absolutely horrendous, and the kids are totally numb that go on these drugs, and the adults too, of course. But their emotional life is totally disconnected, and they have nothing. They don't experience any emotion anymore. Some people claim that they've been helped, yada yada, and that's great for them. That's wonderful. But from the majority, what I've been hearing about is that people become like zombies on these drugs, and it's just a horrendous picture that is unveiling here, and much in the same way, which in a way the society is going, that we are being controlled by, I'm
sure you're absolutely right, because we're brain damaged. Society is damaging our brains in almost every area.
Yeah.
You either try and fight it, but it's hellish difficult to fight it. And it's very difficult to find like-minded people who can move in the right direction. And there's nothing worse than removing our free will, because that's what's happening. Our free will is being taken away from us. And the one thing the ancients understood and the Druids understood was that free will was the most important thing that each of us has. And that is the one thing that makes us perform better and do things better. And nature itself has to have free will to function and perform. If you regiment people and you restrict them and you put them in a totalitarian environment, even if that means giving them dodgy drugs to try and cure one particular problem or another, you're just damaging people further. And it's the way in which the state pumps money into these kind of programs, give them more pills, give them more drugs. And this must be about the most crazy thing that's happening on the planet today. Not understanding that 30 years ago, we could actually heal addiction without drugs and get people into rehabilitation and useful work if we actually cared about those people in the first place.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And then we have a 39 billion pound bill to society in Britain, and 90% of the inmates in Exeter Jail in Britain are therefore drug-related offences. Something like 50% are still on drugs, although they're in a secure prison environment.
Yeah.
How much madder are we going to be when we're allowing people to go to prison and damage their brains even further than they were damaged before they got there in the first place?
Well, it all serves the black market economy, if you will, and the relationship between politicians and the mafia, the drug lords in many countries, and I personally think that the two are interlinked on many levels, and again, it has been shown that even the CIA is having their own planes driving drugs back and forth into between Mexico and the U.S. So there's something else going on here, and I feel at this point at least that this is, if the government didn't want it, it would not exist. But if they truly would like to crack down on this problem and solve it, I think that they actually could. But we're in a time right now where tragedy, where threats to society is actually serving the cause, if you will, for the global agenda more for them than if it would have been taken away, because they need rather the problems in order to propel more control, they instigate more control on us. They need something to remind us that, hey, look at this, look at all the problems that exist out there in the world. You need us, just as the politician says in that movie V for Vendetta. He says that they need to know why they need us. In whatever you do not let go of that. They need us as the big daddy, the secure, that can secure their environment and to keep them safe. And with this promise that as long as we are your rulers, we're going to keep you safe and everything is going to be good. So it's a very, very complex issue, if you will, in that sense, and we're in a horrible situation at the moment, obviously, but ultimately, if we should boil it down, I guess I feel much in the same way that you talked before, Edmund, about personal freedom, that this is also about personal choice and responsibility, meaning that if we were interested in who we are and where we come from, of course, and also where we're going, we could find out things ourselves. We can go on the web, we can go into a library, we can start reading books, we can get interested in who we are and how things work, and take responsibility for our own lives instead of just giving it up all the time, as we seem to be doing right now, to someone else who's supposed to handle the problem, if you know what I mean. To me, it's very simple in that way, but it's very difficult because you can't convince anyone else to become interested in who they are, really. It has to be there to begin with, the inherent drive or interest in this type of things. That's what I see at this point, at least. I don't know about you, Edmund.
Well, I think the people can win. I think things are so bad in politics and religion that a few breaths of fresh air can bring about enormous change. Never underestimate the power of the people. We've seen this in history. But the people have to have the facts straight. It's no good having the kind of riots we had in London on the G20 with about 20 different organizations all disagreeing with each other before they got together to demonstrate.
Yeah.
But what I would say is there is a marvelous charity called the LifeWorks Foundation. And the LifeWorks Foundation I'm now involved with, Dan Winter's involved with them, and they are doing fantastic work on this neurotherapy concept, and also this wonderful idea of looking for the master craftsmen, looking for the movers and shakers, the innovators who are otherwise being ignored and neglected. We need to look for the genuine, the best knowledge we can find on each of the subjects which affect the way our planet operates. And this is, would you believe, a new approach. And I think there's tremendous potential. So don't forget the LifeWorks Foundation and what they're doing and what we can do if we all work together in harmony and look for the kind of social organization where everybody wins.
Sounds good, Edmund. Thank you very much for your time here today. It's been a very eclectic and a varied discussion, which is great, by the way. It's always good to tie things in with old, new, modern, and ancient, interesting areas. And I